sports flowing in their veins. Mackey and Judd on Score North and ScoreNorth.com.
Hey Vikings fans, this is your new football coach, Kevin O'Connell. Could not be more excited to be joining you guys. So great to have you guys aboard. As somebody who's been on the visiting sideline at US Bank Stadium, I can tell you it's the best atmosphere in the entire NFL. I cannot wait to be on the home sideline and giving you guys something to cheer about this coming season.
I love it. He probably did that from his office or his home in Los Angeles, right? Because he was in Los Angeles for the parade. How quickly he turns on that palace of a home atmosphere in Los Angeles.
Our fans suck. Glad I'm going to have some good fans now. There are no Rams fans.
Oh, my gosh. Welcome into another Reckless Speculation Thursday.
Reckless Speculation.
For all of those who celebrate, Mackey, Judd, our executive producer, Declan, and our friend from the 5 Eyewitness News Sports Department and the Scoop Podcast, Darren Doogie Wolfson. Happy Reckless Speculation Thursday, Doogs.
Good morning, Phil. Happy Reckless Speculation Thursday. I'm very upset. Judd, you were at the Wolves game last night. Did you see Gary Trent Sr. sitting courtside? He was right next to the Raptors bench. You should have seen the jacket. Oh, I thought you were there. Then you were there on Tuesday night. Okay, so you didn't go back-to-back nights. You picked the right night to go. Tuesday was fun. Last night, not so much, or at least the end of Tuesday night's game. But did you see that on television when they had the shot early in the game of Gary Trent Sr., what he was wearing? It was a jacket with, literally, I don't even know how to explain it. Declan, did you see it? Please tell me that somebody on this panel saw it.
I saw James Harden's jacket a couple nights ago.
Well, comparable to James Harden.
Wow.
Comparable to, maybe you've seen some of the pictures of Kyle Kuzma.
Oh, my God.
Of the Washington Wizards when he enters the arena.
This is phenomenal.
Some of the stuff that he's worn. Okay, Declan, so you're on Twitter right now. I'm not doing a great job of painting the picture for those who are just listening, maybe don't have Twitter at their fingertips. How would you describe what Gary Trent Sr. was wearing?
I think he killed a wolf and put it on his entire back.
Okay, that's a good way of putting it.
If you thought PETA was mad at me for going through a breeder, they're going to be way more upset at what Gary Trent Sr. has on in this.
So anyway, I'm upset that Judd is not wearing something comparable.
We can make that happen. Let's definitely.
Oh my God, that's awesome.
We'll expand the Score North clothing budget and see if we can get Judd a Gary Trent wolf coat of some kind.
Here's a scoop, by the way. I was texting with Senior late last night. I had to know. I was so curious. I'm like, where does one get a coat like that? He said New York City. He did not buy that here in town. He lives here in town, but he bought it in New York.
He didn't buy it in Chaska?
He did not buy it in Chanhassen, Victoria, or Chaska.
Look at this.
Right, oh, my God. Declan's putting it up on the screen for the YouTube audience. That's pretty amazing.
I love Gary. I was with Gary on Monday for a while at his house, catching up, reminiscing about Junior. Junior was unreal last night. So, yeah, Gary Trent Sr., one of my favorite people.
So we'll talk some more Wolves here later in the Scoop session. And later on, we'll do some old tweets exposed here. But, Dukes, the news just came down as we popped our microphones on here for this episode. It's official. Ed Donatel has been announced as the Vikings defensive coordinator. Mike Pettin will be the assistant head coach and also, will work with the defensive staff. In fact, there's a bunch of announcements here coming out. So assistant head coach Mike Pettin, and then obviously defensive prowess. Ed Donatel, defensive coordinator. Tight end coach and passing game coordinator Brian, Angelicchio? The running backs coach and run game coordinator is Curtis Modkins. I'm not going to read through all of these, but he's got a quarterbacks coach, offensive line coach. The whole staff almost has been hired here. But let's start with Ed Donatel and Mike Pettin, who will oversee the defense. That's 50-plus years of NFL coaching experience. There's some head coaching experience in there with Mike Pettin. Donatel helped lead the Broncos to a top 5 defensive ranking last year. A lot of 3-4 principles, and the Vikings have run a 4-3 defense for decades. And there's a lot of aging players on the Vikings defense with big contracts too. So, what do you make of this from the defensive side of the ball, Dukes?
Well, the last time the Vikings, Judd, you might know better than me, but the last time they did not run a 4-3, 1982. It's in my lifetime, but very early.
85, Dukes.
In my lifetime. Okay, 85. So, we're going back, nearly 40 years. So that is interesting. I will say the Ed Donatel news, which we knew last week, his attorneys were going over the contract last week. The contract was presented to him. this time last week, but that's great that they officially announced it. I'm not quite sure, like I'm overly inspired by the hire, but I am fascinated to see, even though the Vikings last year, they played some hybrid. It's not like they were always in a 4-3 base. But that being said, if the 3-4 is going to be the base, we should get clarity as soon as this afternoon at the Kevin O'Connell news conference at 4:00. I am fascinated by that. I'll add that Paul Gunther, I don't know if they announced a linebackers coach, Phil. Paul Gunther
not yet.
Is interested in remaining here. So even though he's incredibly tight with Zim, not sure there's a marriage there to be had. But I can't tell you now, he's unemployed, right? So he's looking for work. But Paul Gunther enjoyed his time here as a senior defensive assistant last year. He would be interested in being the linebackers coach.
So I think, Duke, the thing that intrigues me the most about what looks like it's now the inevitable shift to a 3-4 is not just the scheme, but the personnel, right? Like who fits who. And my biggest question is, does Danielle Hunter want to play in a 3-4? I think he'd be great because he's just a great player.
He's a freak of an athlete. He'd be fine in a 3-4.
He would, but
3+4 is also the number of games he's played combined the last.
You know what?
Years.
That's the type of cheap shot we don't need. He's a very good player. Why are you?
I wasn't even sure if it was that many, Phil. So thank you.
You guys, come on, you guys. That's terrible. But my point is, the question that I have is, does the Hunter camp see him standing up as basically what qualifies as an outside linebacker in a 3-4? And if they don't, this could get intriguing, because I still think, despite the jab that Phil just took, and he's right, that Danielle's played 7 games in the past 2 years. I do think that if he becomes a trade chip, it would be very interesting. I think, again, he would get you back a nice return, i.e. a first-round pick.
Well, I think that would have to be what they would have to get, right? Like if you're moving off Hunter, it's not for a mid-round pick. Now, the cap hit is $26.1 million, so we know something needs to happen within the first 5 days of the league calendar. That is fast approaching. We are weeks away, not months or anything like that. We're weeks away from, some sort of clarity on the Danielle Hunter situation. Judd, you told me a couple weeks ago, going back to Mobile, the Senior Bowl, just to check on some of the buzz down there. We know how many executives were in Mobile. There was a lot of chatter in Mobile. Among the chatter was people in the league wondering about Danielle Hunter's future here in Minnesota. So it's absolutely a talking point. Now, until I see evidence that the Wilfs are ready to hit some sort of reset button, that they really feel like, hey, let's make another run here in 2022, that would lead me to believe that they find a way to keep Hunter. But you're right when you bring up Danielle, his future, because a lot of league people were wondering about that going back to the Senior Bowl.
Doogie, how far behind are the Vikings? I mean, it took them a couple extra weeks to finalize a GM because they waited so long to fire Rick Spielman, and then they had to wait until after the Super Bowl to even get Kevin O'Connell. Like, he's stepping foot in Minnesota now for the first time today, right? And we're almost a week past the Super Bowl, and a lot of these other teams have, whether it's the scouting process or the free agent process. I mean, the Vikings have a lot to untangle here roster-wise and figure out in big quarterback decisions, and they're kind of cramming in the next 4 weeks. Is it a disadvantage in your mind?
I don't know if it's necessarily a disadvantage. Heck, I can argue it's an advantage with, these new head coaches getting to work with players as soon as, April 3rd. That you get a jump on other teams when you have a new head coach. So the Vikings will begin off-season workouts, their off-season program, April 3rd. I don't necessarily think so, Phil. My understanding is Kevin has been working in Los Angeles for a while. Clearly, we have seen that he helped assemble a large portion of his staff. The combine is still 12 days out. It's not like there's any pro days pre-combine. If he wants to get out and about and travel to some of these pro days, maybe see, who knows, maybe go see a Malik Willis or, some other quarterbacks. They connected. When I say they, Jamal Stevenson, Ryan Munnins, other scouts, the Vikings had their entire scouting department down in Mobile for the Senior Bowl. So they had some FaceTime with a lot of quarterbacks. So like the scouting department, Stevenson, Munnins, the area scouts, like they've been knee deep in the pre-draft process for a while. The number one thing was assembling the staff. Well, Kevin has assembled a good portion of his staff. We've got Thomas Brown of the Rams interviewing for the OC job later this week. I still hear Wes Phillips' steam in some capacity. I don't know what his exact title will be, but there's certainly momentum on that front. Wade Phillips' son joining Kevin's offensive staff here. So I don't. I think everything ramps up March 1st. Let's circle to 12 days from now, Indianapolis, or maybe even that night before, starting on, I guess it would be February 28th, that Monday night. That's when things will really, really ramp up. So no, to answer your question, my own opinion, Phil, no, I don't necessarily think they are behind.
Dukes, on the.
Let me add, Phil, can I add one thing?
No.
Kwesi would have loved to have gotten down to Mobile, and just based on the timeline of everything, that couldn't take place. So if you feel like Kwesi needed that time down in Mobile for whatever reason, multiple reasons, and he didn't get down there, fine. If you want to make that point, that maybe they're slightly behind, but I don't necessarily think that's a huge deal.
No, it's not. And I actually think it might be a break not to go. That is where Rick would sit down with guys and get to spend time and get to know players. I got to know Jeff Gladney. How'd that work, Rick? So no, the more we can remove, football people from psychoanalyzing players, the better. Figure them out as a football player. That drove me crazy. Rick, we got to spend so much time with guys. It's like, yeah, well then.
But psychoanalyzing players is a key part of finding out whether they're going to be great leaders or do something bad off the field. I think your beef is more with his inability to do that. Right.
Yeah, but the problem is football people think the more time I get, the more it's like, you don't know. If you
I want them to spend time with players. How do you not want them to spend time with players?
Hire a PI and put the guy on the guy's tail. That's what
you're so wrong on this.
Hire Inspector Gadget. Well, Rick has told us in the past, they would bring in, the top 30, right? You can bring in local guys pre-COVID. Hopefully we get back to that. I should check on that if we can get back to bringing draft prospects to town. I would imagine so, especially if they're vaccinated, although, is that big of a deal at this point based on the number of people testing positive that are vaccinated? That's a different talking point. But Rick has told us in the past, they red flagged some guys based on like a 9-hour period, whether at Winter Park or at TCO Performance Center, just based on the way that player was interacting with others. So I think there is something to be said about that. Maybe a guy, had already traveled to 4 or 5 previous cities over the course of 8 or 9 days. Maybe he was tired. I'd be careful pigeonholing a guy based on a 9-hour visit. So I sort of get what you're saying, Judd. To me, I defer to my area scouts. These area scouts have been on these guys for a really long time. They've done a majority of the background work. I would trust my area scouts. That's where the synergy comes into play. That's where you'll hear a lot today about collaboration. That's part of the collaboration that the Vikings will be pushing forward for a number of years.
I realize we're sitting here in this eye of the storm or the calm before the storm here. This is like a 4-week lead up to the NFL league year and free agency and the Vikings. There's going to be so much happening here. But do you have any sense at all? I don't think they brought in a new general manager and a new coach and a new staff to just run it to make some cap tweaks and run it back. I don't know why that would make sense. What is your sense over the next 4 weeks, Doogie, as to how drastically this team could change? Do you have any idea yet?
Well, clearly we are going to see some changes. I'm not breaking news, volunteering any information that fans aren't aware of. We will see some turnover. How would you define drastic? I will say on the quarterback, I know there's all this buzz. There are some people that would make a write that down prediction right this second. Write that down, 100%. Kirk Cousins, the Vikings 2022 starting quarterback. The Vikings need to create the perception that they want to keep him. I need way more information on that front before I'm ready to declare that Kirk Cousins is all in on being this team's quarterback. There's also no evidence to suggest that he's willing to take a significant pay cut, right? So that would be the idea. If you keep him, that you would extend him. I also, Phil, I subscribe to what you're saying, that Kwesi signed a 4-year deal. I'm waiting for a text back on O'Connell. I presume he certainly got at least 4. Maybe he got an extra year out of the deal. But let's assume that he's mirrored with Kwesi. Kwesi 4-year deal, Kevin in all likelihood 4-year deal, but maybe 5-year deal. Are you really then like no guarantees? We saw in Detroit, right? Quinn comes in, Patricia comes in, they're gone, before 5 years. Like, Are you really saying, okay, Kirk is my guy? This might be my one and only chance to be a general manager. This might be my one and only chance to be a head coach, even though I'm only, 37 years old, so probably not. But really, are you really going to attach yourself to Kirk Cousins? I still think there's some work to be done there, but I will say I am positive on this. Kevin O'Connell in the interview process did say, hey, I can work with Kirk. There's a lot of things about Kirk I like. I am positive about that.
Yep.
And so I get that. And I think for a guy who is going to become your coach potentially, that's the smart thing for KOC to say. That being said, though, Dukes, you hit on what I think is the most, and this is where the conversation goes, where people who dismiss it and say, oh, Kirk Cousins is going to be the starting QB. Quit talking about it. Fake news. You guys at Score North, you suck. Here's where I think it takes a different direction. Kwesi has to make a very important financial decision here, because you're right. Like, Kirk is not, I joke, but he's not going to come into Kwesi and say, all right, I'll just take a big pay cut and let's do this. Let's go win football games. So the question becomes, do you want to land in the exact spot that you're in today, which is, all right, we'll get that cap hit for 22 way down, but we're going to have to pay it now in 25. And if that's a year where Kwesi says our team should be really good, do you want to potentially cripple yourself again cap-wise then and be like, oh my God, we'd love to sign this guy, but we can't. So this is, it's not this black and white thing of, well, Kirk Cousins stinks. No, Kirk Cousins is great. It's the financial model and what you've done here. And part of the reason why Rick and Mike are gone is because of that contract. No matter what you think of Kirk, that is true. That is very, very true. Do you want to, as Kwesi and Kevin, put yourself in the exact same situation? Because Kirk is not going to just all of a sudden say, yeah, you know what? I love KOC. Cut my contract down to this. It's not going to happen.
Let's also remember this time last year, there were conversations, then some of the turmoil during the season, Kirk's decision not to get the vaccination, the so-called leader of the team saying, no, I'm okay, won't get it. Now I get it. There's been turnover. I said all along there was no way Mike and Kirk were going to be back in 2022. Okay, so Mike's gone. So I get it. The leadership has changed. But there are still some leaders over there, Judd. You know this. There are leaders over there that will say it's time to move on from Kirk, that we need to move on. Heck, Kwesi he's all about collaboration, right? I still wonder deep down if Kwesi would have hired Jim Harbaugh if he wasn't all about all the collaboration, right? Where he absolutely likes Kevin. And he's going to say today, Kevin, my guy, all that. But I still wonder just deep down, if it was 100% Kwesi's decision, not leaning on others for advice, that does he offer the job to Jim Harbaugh, right? So what I'm getting at is Kwesi is going to listen to others there at TCO. Do those people say, yeah, now is the time? If there's ever a time, now is the time. And that's what I'm just saying. I need more information. A lot of it will come to light, I think, over the course of the week in Indianapolis. I think we'll hear a lot of buzz, but maybe even beforehand. But I'm just saying, at this point, I don't have enough information to declare definitively one way or another Kirk is in or Kirk is out. But I'm not dismissing the Kirk is out part, I guess is what I'm saying.
Dukes, my biggest criticism of this franchise for the last, for sure, 5 years, and probably going back even further than that, is they're very comfortable being good, and they're very fearful of let's be careful to move off good, because you never know what's lurking behind door number 2. It could be the Jets or some garbage franchise. So we're comfortable with good. We'd like to be great, but do we really have what it takes to make some of the difficult decisions and moves, like firing a GM and a coach that are good, not great? I mean, they took that step. And Kirk Cousins is the absolute epitome of good, not great. If you have Kirk Cousins as your starting quarterback, You're probably not going to go 3-14. He's professional enough. He can make enough throws. He's not going to sabotage a lot of games. You know, he had that Falcons game last year, like 2 years ago. But like, you're not going to train wreck with Kirk Cousins as your quarterback. I also don't think you can come anywhere near winning a Super Bowl. So how are they going to remain as an ownership group, and then, you know, whatever Kevin O'Connell thinks coming in, are they going to remain attached to good, not great? Or do they have the guts to move off of something that's a known commodity and enter into this unknown world of quarterbacks? That is the most fascinating question in the next 4 weeks for me.
Well, is it also possible that the answer is somewhere in between? That, okay, Kirk is not taking a discount. Maybe there's not a trade to be had, or at least they can't get the return that they're seeking, where Kirk actually plays out the final year of his contract. I know it is cap hell. I know logic says something needs to happen with the $45 million cap hit, but is it possible that the answer is in between? That Kirk plays out the season, then they make the transition 1 year from now? I'm also starting to wonder about that.
Yeah, I think if you can, the thing about that is if you can get any sort of draft pick compensation for him, even if it's a third-round pick, wouldn't that be better than sitting on him and letting him take up $45 million? I mean, because you'd have to say goodbye to other players then too, right?
Now you're still going to eat some money there, right? You're going to take some sort of dead money cap hit. But yeah, if you're taking a $10 or $12 million hit compared to 45, 10. And you can get a mid-round pick. Now, you know, some people listening will be like, well, what about the Eagles getting what they got for Carson Wentz? What do you mean? Kirk Cousins for a third or fourth round pick? Are you kidding me? You need to get more than that. But yeah, and that's where I say if there's ever a time, now is the time, you know, and maybe you identify a quarterback in this draft class. I like the quarterbacks in next year's draft class more, but you're picking there at 12. Malik Willis of Liberty may be staring you in the face, or the kid from Pitt or the kid from Nevada or some other quarterback. Identify that guy and, you know, maybe go all in that way. I'm telling you, they spent, you know, as much time as they could with a number of quarterbacks, including Willis in Mobile.
If you're presented with the three options for Kirk that we just talked about, my personal clear-cut one is a trade.
Mm-hmm.
But if options 2 and 3 are bite the bullet, it's a huge cap hit, it sucks, but you just say, okay, or extend him, I'm taking the 2022 cap hit. I'm not extending him. Like, that's my one thing is if I have no interest in tying up my franchise, again, the important thing is at the price tag. So like if I am left to say, okay, I can extend you, and if I do, 2025 is going to suck from a cap standpoint, or I just right now say goodbye to Harrison Smith and Kendricks, and Kirk is our quarterback, but then there's potential freedom to move on after 22. I'm taking that option. It's far from ideal, but I do not want to hitch my wagon financially to Kirk and end up in 3 years right back where we are right now.
Yeah, so though 3 years from now, what's the cap look like? It's going to keep going up, up, up. True. So, you know, when you're kicking the can down the road, at least you know the cap is going up.
But his agent knows that in the negotiations for his client too.
Yeah,
right.
Of course Mike
knows that. That's why I don't want to do this.
100%. Yeah. By the way, Judd, I don't see a scenario where Kendricks is cut. You know, you can label some other guys in that mix. I would be shocked if Eric Kendricks is let go.
Okay.
So many things. All right, Dukes, give us a few rapid fire scoops here. What do you? The Timberwolves go in to the All-Star break here. A small handful of games above 500. Ant has an ankle, so you know, their defense is kind of broken down a little bit. They're kind of, but they're in a great spot coming out of the All-Star break. Pat Bev just signed a 1-year extension. What are you hearing on the Wolves front right now?
Well, on Ant, like that was as bad. I'm trying to avoid, you know, overreaction, hyperbole, heat of the moment from last night, but that was as bad as he's played as a pro. And, you know, is it all the ankle? Heck, a couple weeks ago, he alluded to, you know, the idea that his knee is bothering him, although in that same game, he exploded for a dunk. So, you know, guys are beat up 55, 60 games into the season, just the way it is. But I do know some people felt close to him, advised him to sit out last night, saying, Ant, sit out. But he said no. it was his call ultimately to play. He said, no, I'm playing, and I plan on playing in Cleveland this weekend, the Rising Stars game, and I'll be good to go come February 24th against the Memphis Grizzlies. I'm 20 years old. I can fight through things. I'll be all right. So, there's something to be said about, the toughness of Amp, but man, like he wasn't good last night. Denver wins last night, Phil. Denver wins in San Francisco. They beat the Warriors. So 23 games to go for the Wolves. They are 3 games back in the loss column, 2.5 overall, but I always look at loss column. The Wolves are 3 games back in the loss column of Denver. Signs point to Denver before the regular season is over, getting back at least one of, if not both, Jamal Murray, Michael Porter Jr. I just think it's going to be really, really hard to catch Denver. I don't see a scenario where they catch Dallas. Dallas won in Miami this week. I don't see it. So I think the Wolves are locked into that 7 spot, or do the Clippers make a leap when they get Paul George back mid-March? All signs point to Paul George coming back in a few weeks. Kawhi Leonard, no. Norman Powell, there is no timetable, but he doesn't need surgery. But we don't know if Norman Powell will be back anytime real soon. But Paul George, the signs point to him being back in a month. I'm just telling you, that is a nightmare scenario. Whether it's a game in Los Angeles or here, a 7-8 game where it's Wolves-Clippers.
And the Lakers aren't going to – I don't think the Lakers – Anthony Davis was writhing in pain, again.
He was. Now, they beat Utah last night. Gobert's back for Utah. The Lakers won that game last night. But, yeah, Anthony Davis can break down at any moment. LeBron, all the minutes he's played, going back 20 years. I mean, I know he's the bionic man, but we've seen him even wear down a little bit this year. So you wonder about that. So, yeah, can you see a scenario where the Wolves lose to the Clippers in the 7-8 game, then the Lakers win that 9-10 game? They play Portland or New Orleans or Sacramento, whomever. The Lakers win that game. Then it's Wolves-Lakers for the 8th and final playoff spot, but that the Wolves win that game just because the Lakers just aren't that good and they are all banged up. Sure. Then the Wolves do make the playoffs. Pat Bev continues his streak of never missing the playoffs. But then you're playing Phoenix. I mean, Phoenix is pretty much locked into that 1 seed. Maybe the Wolves can win 1 game, but, I think it'd be 4-0 or 4-1. Maybe it's 4-1, but, I don't like your chances against Phoenix. And Bobby Marks reminds me of this all the time, Phil. Nothing is guaranteed. And that's where we go back to last week. Did the Wolves miss out on doing something? At one point, Phil, they thought they had a trade done. My understanding is it was for Montrezl Harrell, but they thought they had a trade done. At least bring in somebody to help. And we can debate how much Harrell would help. He looked okay on Tuesday night here for Charlotte. But we can debate how much Montrezl Harrell would help this group. But I just wonder, did Sachin Gupta miss out on a window, an opportunity? Because nothing is guaranteed. You can run it back next year, but health isn't guaranteed next year. This sort of offensive success, we think it would probably come close to happening, but isn't guaranteed. Just, when the window's there, you oftentimes have to strike. And I just wonder, and I'm telling you, the Wolves, if you had talked to the Wolves at 12:30 1 week ago, 12:30 Central, I think they would have told you we're making a trade with 90 minutes to go till the deadline expired. They thought they were on the cusp of a deal, and it didn't happen. And I don't know 100% it was for Montrezl Harrell, but they were definitely in on Montrezl Harrell. There were a number of discussions, proposals made on the Wolves landing Montrezl Harrell. But I just wonder if they missed an opportunity, because even if you end up as the 8th seed, that's a horrible matchup against Phoenix, right? So the best case scenario all along has been find a way to get to 6, but I'm just not optimistic based on Denver getting healthy, Denver creating a little bit more separation last night. The Wolves' schedule isn't a train wreck the rest of the way, but it's not the easiest schedule either. I mean, it's okay. I haven't looked at Denver's schedule, but I just think making up 3 games in the loss column over 23 is going to be really, really hard.
Well, Denver going into the week had 2 or 3 games left against Golden State, but they won one of them. So, if they rack up wins like that, it's going to be tough to catch them.
Is one of them toward the end of the year? Because, Phoenix is 5-6 games up on Golden State at this point. So Phoenix is pretty much locked into that 1 seed. But then there's separation 2 and 3. Isn't there a little bit? Now, I think Memphis might be relatively close. So maybe Golden State would have incentive to to play this thing out because trust me, I don't think you necessarily want to play Denver, the 6th seed in the first round of the playoffs. If you're Golden State, if you can avoid Denver, like Golden State has incentive, what I'm getting at, to be the 2 seed, not
absolutely.
the 3 seed, right?
Yeah.
Then you want home court in that second round, figuring, okay, 2 versus 3 matchup. If you're playing, let's say, the Grizzlies or the Nuggets in the second round, you want home court advantage. So maybe the Warriors would have incentive to play the regular season all the way through. But what I'm getting at is if you're playing Denver, let's say April 7th or April 8th, it's possible Golden State is locked into the 2 seed where they then would rest some guys.
Yeah.
Right. So I'm just telling you, it's hard for me to see, hopefully I'm wrong. But it's hard for me to see the Wolves making up 3 in the loss column on Denver with 23 games left.
Yeah. There it is. Love it.
Speculation.
Great stuff, Dukes. Great stuff. The calm before the storm. There's going to be so much to get into the next few weeks on the Vikings front.
Yes, I'm catching up with Randy Dobnak later today, so maybe he's got some insight from Taylor Rogers.
What's he doing now?
Well, you know what? Here's the interesting thing. One of his good friends is getting married this weekend. Normally, Randy would be in Fort Myers right now. Yep. Pitchers and catchers would have reported earlier this week. He actually has an opportunity to go to this wedding of a buddy of his. So I guess personally, it works out a little bit for Randy. He's back home in West Virginia, has a new house. He's been throwing. He's got a catcher that can catch him there. So, he's got a regular throwing routine. So he'll be ready to go for spring training, whenever that happens. If it's even spring training, maybe it's summer training at this point, but he'll be ready to go. So I'm catching up with him. College baseball season starts this weekend. So I was texting with Sean Johnson, the Twins. What is he? The director of scouting, whatever his official title is. He's in charge of the draft. So he'll be out west this weekend. I know he's watching Arizona State, Gonzaga, a few other teams out west. He told me he hired a new area scout out there, so he'll be able to bond with the new area scout.
Awesome. Right on. All right,
Thanks,
Doogie. Darren Doogie Wolfson, inside information about your favorite Minnesota sports teams. We'll see you next week, buddy.
Okay, see you, boys. Bye-bye.
All right, see ya. That's Doogie. By the way, Doogie's appearance today presented by our friends at Federated Mutual Insurance Company. If you are a business owner out there looking to take your business to the next level, Federated comes in with over 100 years of experience when it comes to risk management, protection, all sorts of tools and resources. They are dedicated to helping you maximize your business. Federatedinsurance.com, and remember, at Federated, it's our business to protect yours. Listen, if I were a lesser man, I would have made some sort of joke there about how Randy Dobnak might have even more time on his hands later in the season too, even if the season starts, just because he.
I thought about it myself,
but
oh boy,
yeah, they felt the need to give him like $15 million or something.
I know.
He's a good guy.
And you know what? At this point in time, I just don't care anymore.
I don't care about baseball right now either. Screw baseball. In fact, let's